Okay, let's unpack this because,
Sure.
well, we are living through what feels like an immense information age paradox.
Hmm.
On one hand, the sheer volume of data, of news, and this instant analysis available to us is just, it's overwhelming.
It is.
But on the other hand, when genuinely major, deeply public incidents happen, I'm thinking about the continuous, agonizing silence surrounding the Epstein files, or the fragmented investigation into the recent assassination of Charlie Kirk. The official clarity from institutions like the FBI just seems to evaporate.
It does. It
We
vanishes.
get a striking headline and then just a deafening, enduring void.
And that deafening void is the central issue we really need to tackle today. It's that gap between the event and the explanation.
Right.
Our mission here is to equip you, the listener, with the necessary intelligence frameworks, the essential analytical tools to navigate that information vacuum successfully.
Okay.
Because when official channels stop flowing, speculation starts. And that speculation, it quickly comes entrenched as fact.
Yeah, it hardens almost immediately.
It does. And we need to move beyond just asking, are they hiding something nefarious? And instead apply a rigorous framework to determine if that vacuum is hiding, outright malice, simple government incompetence, or, as is often the case, just necessary legal and constitutional processes that are specifically designed to slow the system down.
And that is the goal, giving you those intelligence racers to cut through the noise and figure out what you're actually looking at.
Exactly.
So we're going to start by dissecting the constitutional structure that fundamentally mandates this slowdown and creates that information gap. Then we'll get into the analytical tools, specifically Occam's and Hanlon's razors, that help us distinguish, quickly and efficiently between a genuine complex conspiracy and just simple amateur error. And finally, we'll apply these tools to a massive, ongoing geopolitical question. Is the recent highly publicized U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean truly about Venezuelan narcoterrorism? Or is that whole narrative a carefully calculated red herring aimed at a much, much larger global player?
A much more dangerous one, yeah.
So let's start with that foundational structure of the U.S. government, which is, it's really designed around this essential separation of powers.
It is.
We have the legislative branch, that's Congress, the House. Their job is to make the laws. Then we have the executive branch, the president and their cabinet, who execute and administer those laws.
And critically, we have the judicial branch. And this is the part people often forget.
Right.
This is the entire legal and justice system, meaning the Department of Justice, the DOJ, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. They fall entirely under this judicial vertical.
Not the president's.
Not the president's. And while these three branches are designed to check and balance each other's power, they are also fiercely protective of their own core duties, their own constitutional verticals.
Okay.
So the FBI, as part of the judicial branch, understands there are certain duties defined by law that absolutely cannot be compromised, regardless of what the legislative branch or even the executive branch might demand.
And this structural reality is why that constant political struggle over something like the Epstein files makes perfect sense, even though it's so deeply frustrating.
It's infuriating for the public.
It is. And even when a president makes a campaign promise to release everything, it's not that simple.
Not at all.
The president, coming from the executive branch, can argue fiercely for maximum transparency. That's the political mandate they run on.
Of course.
But the judicial branch, specifically the DOJ, ultimately determines what actually gets shared, what has to be heavily redacted, or what is held back completely. The executive cannot just command the judicial branch to reveal detail.
They can't. Not if the judicial system deems that withholding that information is necessary for legal or national security reasons. It's a fundamental protection.
That's the core structural protection, and it just runs completely counter to the public's immediate demand for speed.
It does. I mean, imagine the complexity. The judicial branch is legally obligated to protect the integrity of its current and future cases. So even if the legislative branch, through repeated votes in Congress, demands the judicial branch release those files, that doesn't give them control over how much information is released or even where it's released.
So that might just go to a closed committee or something.
Exactly. Often, the files might only be released to a select high-security body, like a Senate Intelligence Committee or a relevant subcommittee, not to the American people directly.
But let's talk about the redactions. We hear the word constantly, but what specifically are they protecting with all those black bars?
They are protecting the integrity of the justice system itself. I mean, any information that touches upon ongoing criminal investigations, law enforcement intelligence, or national security relevance is legally subject to redaction by the DOJ.
So things like witness location.
Witness locations, the methods used for surveillance, the identity of confidential informant CIs, or even the evidence trail that they need to prosecute secondary targets.
I see.
This inherent conflict, the executive demanding transparency versus the judicial protecting its vertical duties, is what guarantees the information will slow down and often just stop.
So it's a feature, not a bug.
It's a feature of the system, not a flaw, but it feels awful to the public waiting for answers.
And that structural conflict is then just. It's amplified by the dizzying speed of modern communication.
Oh, absolutely.
And what's fascinating here is how the appointment of certain executive appointees, like Kash Patel, created this really unique dynamic, this cross-pollination of government and social media speed.
He was very public. He openly stated, "We're going to be super transparent," which is the language of modern public relations and digital engagement, not traditional government.
Right. And that very modern desire for speed and immediate transparency, it just clashes fundamentally with the established speed of government.
Which is often measured in months or years, not minutes.
Exactly. And we saw clear signs that this culture clash led directly to operational incompetence. You're talking about the Charlie Kirk investigation.
Yes. The FBI, perhaps driven by that desire to meet the public's ravenous need for immediate answers, prematurely released details about the investigation.
Can you zero in on that for us? What details were released too early?
Well, early on, the FBI, in coordination with high-level appointees like Patel, came out on official channels and released information saying they had apprehended a suspect in the Charlie Kirk killing.
Okay, I remember that.
But here's the thing. They did this before the actual state police, who physically made the arrest and were handling the evidence, were ready or willing to share the same details.
So they jumped the gun.
Massively.
Yeah.
In reality, they didn't have a legally confirmed suspect, a person against whom sufficient evidence has been gathered to warrant charging. They had an old man who simply volunteered information.
He just walked in and claimed he did it.
Basically. But there was no corroborating evidence collected yet. That premature announcement, rushed out at the speed of social media, immediately created doubt about the quality and the reliability of the entire investigation.
And the sources highlight that this isn't just about PR, it's about specialized training and using a very precise vocabulary.
It is entirely about professional vernacular and compartmentalization. People who are career government professionals, seasoned police officers, career FBI agents, they spend their entire professional lives building a precise vocabulary for both denoting legal responsibility and, frankly, for strategically dodging premature commitment.
Right. So the difference between a witness and a suspect.
It's enormous. A witness is simply someone who saw something. A person of interest is someone the police want to interview. A suspect is someone they have probable cause to arrest and charge. The legal distinctions are huge.
And using the wrong term, even accidentally, can jeopardize a whole case.
Absolutely. If an outsider appointed to a high role doesn't have that career upbringing, they find it very easy to use the wrong term, like calling a person of interest a suspect in the wrong context.
Which can create grounds for dismissal in court later.
It can, but unfortunately, the media and the public jump on this vernacular misstep, and they often misinterpret the intention as malicious.
They think it's a cover-up.
Exactly. An official like Kash Patel was likely just trying to comfort the American public, reassuring them the FBI was active. But the incorrect terminology he used immediately created a public perception of confusion and undermined the agency's credibility.
So if the professional standard is maintained, this is why the public is really meant to be the last to know anything definitive.
That is the professional norm, and it's based on a security model. We are supposed to be focused on our everyday lives, our jobs, our families, feeling safe and secure enough to focus our energy on being productive.
Right.
And in order to guarantee that security, the government has to be able to focus its energy on a comprehensive investigation, on safety, without the constant distraction or pressure of real-time public scrutiny.
When we force them to operate at the speed of social media, we sacrifice rigor for immediacy.
That's the trade-off.
But when that rigorous professionalism appears to break down, or when the process just seems agonizingly slow and confusing, the cost to the nation is huge.
It's massive.
And we see this erosion of trust in two ways. Distrust in the government's intent, the feeling they're hiding something, and distrust in their competence, the feeling they're just bad at their jobs.
And both forms of distrust are deeply corrosive. The massive lack of trust we're facing right now leads to this widespread chronic anxiety across the population. It's not just a political headache, it's a public health issue.
So how does that anxiety translate into a measurable societal impact?
It absolutely reduces national productivity by consuming cognitive bandwidth.
Oh.
Anxiety and fear are enormous resource drains.
Right.
If you feel like you have to constantly watch your own back, if you can't trust the local police, or you can't trust the schools, or you even begin to distrust your neighbor because of these highly publicized incidents, all of that consumes your attention.
That's energy that's not going into your job or your community.
Precisely. It's cognitive energy that's diverted away from contributing productively to the economy, to innovation, to building something. It's exhausting, and it's corrosive to the national fabric. This anxiety encourages us to focus on short-term survival rather than long-term investment.
Okay, now that we understand the structural issues, the constitutional checks, and the competence failures that inevitably lead to these information gaps, let's talk about how conspiracy theories immediately fill that space. You said they follow a predictable, almost mechanical pattern.
The anatomy is remarkably consistent. A factual event occurs, a sudden death, a security lapse, a massive file being redacted, and this event is immediately followed by a prolonged, unsettling absence of information from authoritative sources.
And that's the invitation.
That is the invitation. Anytime those two things happen simultaneously, it creates the perfect breeding ground, and it just invites conspiracy.
And this taps into a fundamental psychological mechanism you call the closed-loop brain.
Yes. The human brain is inherently designed for self-preservation, and because of that, it absolutely dislikes an open loop. It hates not having a conclusion.
It wants a neat story.
It wants a neat story. It resists having to wait indefinitely for resolution. Our brains crave very clear, closed, consistent conclusions because certainty makes us feel happy, satisfied, and, most importantly, safe and secure. The moment there's a gap in the story, the brain rushes in to fill it.
Often with the most dramatic story.
With the most dramatic and emotionally satisfying narrative, even if it's entirely fabricated.
But the pursuit of justice, ironically, requires us to keep that loop open, to stay in that uncomfortable place of uncertainty for a really long time.
That is the tragic conflict. In order for our legal system to effectively prosecute, it has to go through a long, often secretive process of investigation and case building.
Right.
If that process is compromised because the public or the media know critical evidence before it can be presented to the court, the entire evidence trail is undermined.
So our need to know can actually prevent justice from being done.
It can. The fundamental conflict here is the public's emotional need to know versus the legal system's absolute requirement for secrecy to ensure justice. When we demand information prematurely, we are actively working against the justice process. We have to accept the intellectual discipline of just sitting in that uncomfortable uncertainty.
So we have to sit with the uncertainty, but we don't have to sit there defenseless. The first critical tool we have to use is drawing a sharp line between objective and subjective information.
A non-negotiable line.
So how do we define objective information with professional rigor?
Okay, so objective information, by intelligence standards, must be verified, proven, and corroborated by multiple independent sources. Having one fact, one video clip, one receipt, as they say, that's only the start of the inquiry.
It's not the conclusion.
It is not the conclusion.
And if that one source becomes the origin point for everyone else's reporting, we fall into that common trap of circular reporting.
Circular reporting is the death of objective truth. Many conspiracy theories trace their origin back to one single person, one specific location, or one initial, often unverified source.
And then everyone else just repeats it.
Exactly. They cite each other as evidence. This creates a large volume of sources that all ultimately link back to the same initial unverified claim. It completely lacks true objective validation.
So you have to find someone who has no contact with the original source, verifying the same thing.
That's the gold standard. If a crucial claim is made, say a specific connection between two powerful figures, how do we know that someone who had no contact with the original claimant is verifying the exact same information through their own independent means? If the evidence is just based on, suspicious timing or gut feelings, it's subjective. It's emotion, not objective fact.
I think of this whole struggle as trying to navigate that information torrent you described, like falling into a fast river.
That analogy perfectly captures the nature of information in our digital world. We are in a tidal wave of information, both subjective and objective, factual and feelings-based. Right. If you try to fight the volume, if you try to swim upstream against everything being thrown at you, You will be choked, exhausted, and just overpowered.
You have to go with the flow.
You have to learn how to navigate the current. Let the flow carry you, but strategically push yourself left or right, weaving your way toward your desired destination, which is either facts or fabrication. This requires discipline and patience.
Okay, so once we've sorted the subjective noise and found the points that seem verifiable, we need a measurement tool to gauge the likelihood of the remaining theories. That's the index of probability and reliability.
Right. This index is how you apply analytical rigor to a conclusion before you declare it a fact. You're measuring the intrinsic likelihood of an incident happening, that's probability, against the trustworthiness and independence of a source reporting it, that's reliability.
And both have to be high for a theory to be taken seriously.
Both have to be high.
So if you have a highly trusted, reliable source reporting something that seems highly improbable, like they claim they saw a ghost, that still registers as low probability overall.
Exactly. And we use multiple intelligence streams to boost that measurement.
Okay, explain that.
Well, we differentiate between different streams of intelligence. For example, signals intelligence, or SIGINT Inc., is intelligence gathered through intercepting electronic signals like communications intercepts or radar data.
Right.
Human intelligence, or HumanInt, is intelligence gathered from human sources like informants or spies.
Okay.
So when you have two different entirely independent streams verifying the same conclusion, like a highly reliable human source, HumanInt, reporting they received orders to launch a missile, and that is simultaneously matched by an electronic intercept, SIGINT, verifying the missile coordinates, the probability scales up dramatically.
That cross-verification where the systems can't communicate with each other is the objective gold standard.
It is the gold standard. Conversely, single-source reporting immediately reduces the probability of accuracy.
So if a known conspiracy theorist posts something with no other sources,
that theory sits firmly at the lowest end of the probability index. The whole purpose of this tool is to train yourself to stop focusing energy on the lowest probability theories, no matter how emotionally compelling they might feel.
Now for the final, most efficient tools, the essential shortcuts to truth. First, Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is often the correct one.
And its partner, Hanlon's razor. You should not subscribe to conspiracy that which can be explained through incompetence.
Right.
In almost every situation involving bureaucracy, government error, or public service failures, incompetence is overwhelmingly the more probable explanation than a complex, coordinated plot involving dozens of highly skilled actors.
It's easy to say Hanlon's razor, but it's much harder to apply it when the public evidence points to something shocking. It takes real intellectual discipline to look for the dull answer.
It really does.
So let's apply Hanlon's razor deeply to the recent high-profile killings, like the United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson, and the Charlie Kirk assassination.
Okay. When you analyze the operational details of both, they overwhelmingly show amateur tendencies. Take the killing of Brian Thompson. It was a textbook amateur operation carried out by a single individual, Luigi Mannion.
Right.
The attack was executed in plain sight, demonstrating a mix of impulse and some basic planning, but absolutely zero operational security. The escape route was poorly planned, and the killer was captured shortly after in a very public place, a McDonald's.
Not exactly professional hit.
Not at all. And when you look at the Charlie Kirk killer, there were also strong amateur tendencies in the execution and the subsequent capture.
So what specifically distinguishes an amateur act from a professional, state-sponsored operation?
The professionals prioritize deniability and compartmentalization. An amateur often act on impulse, emotion, adrenaline. They leave an emotional residue, poorly planned escape routes, reliance on common, traceable firearms, and a high likelihood of confessing or acting erratically under pressure. A professional, state-sponsored hit is characterized by precision, untraceable movements, weapons that can't be traced back to the user, and immediate, total operational silence from the perpetrator.
So the fact that the suspect in the Kirk case volunteered information?
Or that the Thompson killer was easily found points overwhelmingly to an individual acting alone, driven by personal motive or fixation, not complex, foreign, or rogue domestic support.
And this logic is absolutely essential when addressing the more intense conspiracy theories, like the claim that Israel was involved in the Kirk killing because he had become anti-Israel.
A narrative that gained a lot of traction, yes.
How does the concept of blowback just fundamentally destroy that theory?
Blowback is the absolute biggest concern in high-stakes international relations. Blowback is the severe penalty you pay when a covert action becomes known to your allies and your rivals.
Okay.
In this context, it would mean that core allies like the U.S. stop sharing crucial intelligence, stop cooperating on sensitive military matters, or severely downgrade diplomatic relations.
Huge price to pay.
For Israel, as a state engaged in a constant existential struggle, they do not want to risk that level of blowback, especially not inside the United States, for a political commentator.
Because their strategic priority is purely existential survival against imminent threats.
Correct. You cannot compare Israel's response and preparation for genuine existential threats, like Hamas, Hezbollah, or Iran, who pose immediate risk to civilian life, to a political threat, like a commentator in the U.S.
They're not in the same category?
Not even close. Israel's security planning is designed years in advance against persistent existential enemies. To suggest that they would risk alienating their strongest ally, the United States, by conducting a messy assassination on U.S. soil for political reasons, it's strategically illogical.
The risk versus reward is completely asymmetrical.
Precisely. A huge, potentially alliance-breaking risk for a minimal temporary gain. The most logical way for any sophisticated government to handle a political threat in an allied nation would be to try to woo the person back, bribe them, or discredit them through soft power.
Not eliminate them.
Not eliminate them with violence that would destroy the entire relationship. Hanlon's razor confirms it. An amateur lone actor is far, far more likely than a complex foreign operation with guaranteed catastrophic blowback.
So if the simplest explanation for major killings points away from complex foreign plots, we have to ask, where do the complex, amoral geopolitical calculations fit in? Let's turn our attention back to the Epstein puzzle. You argue the most probable explanation for why he was protected comes down to his core utility as a covert informant, a CI.
Yes. The truth, in law enforcement and intelligence, is often found in the uncomfortable middle ground. And the difficult truth here is that in the eyes of the justice system, a bad guy doing illegal things, even horrific ones, is useful if they provide access to other worse targets.
Their crimes become an access route.
An access route for the Justice Department to bring down bigger targets with wider reach and deeper implications.
And it's crucial to remember the distinction we made earlier, that this makes him an FBI asset, not a CIA asset.
That distinction is everything.
Exactly.
The CIA is intelligence collection under the executive branch, which can theoretically be compelled to declassify documents by the president.
Right.
The FBI is law enforcement under the judicial branch. Epstein functioned as a CI for the FBI. His utility was not that he was a pedophile, which, while morally horrific, is not a high national security priority in terms of state survival, but that he was deeply connected to corrupt world leaders, high-ranking politicians, and wealthy figures who are security risks.
Money laundering targets, criminal targets.
All of it. So his likely amnesty or protection was a classic cold-hearted trade-off in the system.
It was an exchange. His cooperation against bigger fish in exchange for protection.
Exactly. He chose his survival instinct over his tribal instinct, cooperating to save himself.
But this logical explanation forces us to accept a deeply uncomfortable moral reality, that the justice system prioritizes utility and access over the immediate punishment of a horrific crime. How do we reconcile that?
It's nearly impossible to reconcile ethically, but we have to understand it analytically. The system operates on a hierarchy of threats.
Right.
If using Epstein secures the prosecution of, say, a hostile foreign agent or a major international money launderer that threatens the stability of the entire U.S. financial system, the system will rationalize that exchange. The goal is to bring down the largest possible network.
And the fact that the president can't just release the files proves that the judicial branch is protecting this process.
It proves the system is working as designed in that sense, yes.
And regarding the release of the files, even if the president demands it, even if Congress votes for it, we still won't see the full, unredacted story.
We won't, and we have to accept that reality. If the judicial branch releases anything, it will be heavily redacted by the Department of Justice to protect ongoing criminal investigations and intelligence relevance.
It would set a terrible precedent.
It would be catastrophic. Releasing full CI details, the specific methods, locations, or identities used by Epstein, would instantly undermine the trust of all other global assets who are currently providing information to the FBI or DOJ on other cases.
It would dry up all their sources.
Instantly. The promise of confidentiality is non-negotiable for the system to function. The intelligence apparatus views its own operational security as a national security priority, which legally justifies withholding that information from us.
Okay, let's pivot now to what you identified as the most active, current geopolitical red herring. The official narrative that the U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean is solely about targeting Venezuelan narco-terrorism.
This is a classic textbook red herring. It's designed to be universally palatable. We're given a justification, Maduro is bad, and drugs are bad, that everyone can agree on.
It's an easy sell.
It's a very easy sell. But when you apply the analytical rigor of our index of probability and reliability to the official claims, the justifications just fall apart.
Okay, so how does the official justification fail the test?
First, let's look at the definition of narco-terrorism. A terrorist must use violence to gain specific political change. Cartels aren't using violence in the U.S. to change U.S. politics. They're using it for profit. The definition is strained.
It doesn't really fit.
It doesn't. Second, and this is the most important part, the focus is hugely disproportionate to the actual drug problem. Look at the numbers. At most, only 15% of the cocaine entering the United States comes through Venezuela.
Only 15%.
At most. Upwards of 90% of all cocaine goes through the primary pathway, Mexico.
Right.
So if the U.S. military were truly prioritizing the war on drugs, our entire focus and military asset deployment would be on the Mexican border, not the remote Caribbean coast of Venezuela.
So if it's not truly about drugs, it must be about a much larger geopolitical threat. And you point directly at China's expanding influence in the region.
The primary focus is absolutely China. We have to look at Venezuela's partners. Venezuela's top military weapons supplier is currently China, and Venezuela maintains one of the largest amphibious assault forces in all of Latin America.
Entirely supplied by the Chinese.
Entirely. And this is a crucial military capability. If the U.S. wants insight into what a fully modern, Chinese-equipped amphibious assault looks like, which is exactly the capability they would use against Taiwan, Venezuela, offers our single best opportunity for real-world intelligence collection and observation.
We need to see how their tech works.
We need to see their capabilities, their tactics, and how they would use them under pressure.
And this ties directly to the extremely interesting and suspiciously fast timeline you outlined involving the Panama Canal.
The timeline is simply too coincidental to dismiss. The Panama Canal is the single most important strategic maritime choke point in the Western Hemisphere.
Of course.
During the previous administration, there was growing alarm over the fact that a Chinese-owned subsidiary effectively owned or controlled the entrance and exit ports of the canal, a massive vulnerability.
They could shut down our commerce instantly.
Instantly.
Huh?
So in March of this year, the U.S. demanded that the Chinese-owned subsidiary sell its majority stake to U.S. investment firms. That transfer of control, shifting the strategic choke point back into American-aligned hands, happened swiftly in August of that year.
And what happened immediately following that transfer of control?
Within 2 weeks after U.S. investment firms gained control, the first drug boat was publicly blown up off the coast of Venezuela by U.S.-aligned forces.
Wow.
And that was followed by the highly publicized buildup of U.S. military assets in the Caribbean. This sudden emphasis on narco-terrorism justified the military presence needed to intimidate China right after we seized control of their crucial shipping route.
So the military buildup is not just about blowing up a few leaky boats. It's about strategically consolidating U.S. military power to send a massive aggressive message to Beijing.
It is a profound aggressive signal. China has massive infrastructure leases, military bases, shipping routes all through the Caribbean and South America as part of its Belt and Road Initiative. We are sending our forces there to tell the Chinese, in no uncertain terms, don't forget, this is our sphere of influence. Look how fast we can take your strategic investments and cut off your supply chains if you decide to mess with us.
It's a show of force.
It's a show of force that provides immediate real-time intelligence collection on their amphibious capabilities and shows China exactly what kind of rapid military response they can expect if they continue to expand their influence in this hemisphere.
This new conflict model, this strategic aggression masked by a calm, friendly exterior, is what you call the rice war, or the water polo conflict.
The analogy is necessary because this is fundamentally different from the U.S.-Soviet Cold War, where the economies were separate and we could erect a genuine Iron Curtain.
We're too intertwined now.
We are economically intertwined to the point of total mutual dependence, so we have to fight a shadow conflict, or the water polo war, kicking each other aggressively under the sheets while maintaining a calm surface, pretending to be friends above the water.
Because a full decoupling would be mutually assured destruction.
It would. If we were to out China completely, we would instantly lose access to critical manufactured goods, plastics, pharmaceuticals, and, crucially, rare earth minerals. If they cut us off, they lose access to high technology. It would be mutually assured economic destruction.
So we have to use red herrings and shadow conflicts instead of direct confrontation.
We must.
So given the shadow conflict, how will China approach the central geopolitical prize, Taiwan? Will they risk the economic disruption of a hot war?
I believe China is firmly on track to take Taiwan, likely by 2027, as promised by Xi Jinping, but they will not risk a hot war with the U.S.
Oh, how do they do it?
I believe they will take it administratively, mirroring the process they successfully used to absorb Hong Kong in 2019. They create administrative legal bridges and change internal laws so that when they move in physically, resistance immediately becomes illegal.
Which gives them the legal grounds to arrest dissenters without officially starting a war.
Exactly. And we're already seeing China heavily investing in espionage and comprehensive information warfare against Taiwan, creating internal chaos. Taiwan currently has a prime minister who is pro-independence, but a parliament that is predominantly pro-reunification. This creates the exact administrative chaos China needs to justify intervention.
If China takes Taiwan administratively, what is the U.S. reaction? Will we actually intervene militarily?
I am extremely skeptical of military intervention. We will likely sit on our thumbs.
Really?
We will issue strong UN votes condemning the action, just like we see with the situation in Ukraine and Russia, but we will not intervene militarily because a hot conflict would force that immediate catastrophic break in economic dependence.
China knows we won't risk it.
They know they hold critical economic levers, rare earth minerals, control over global supply chains. If we fight for Taiwan, China cuts off our access to these vital goods, and the U.S. economy, which is already strained, would enter a deep depression. Our leadership is not willing to risk those domestic consequences.
So China's long game is actually passive aggression. They're counting on our own internal economic failure to secure their global dominance.
That is the core of their strategy. China is hoping for an internal economic meltdown or paralysis in the U.S., allowing them to gain global dominance without ever having to resort to a hot conflict.
Because they know our government's incentives.
They know that the economic incentives for the U.S. government are fundamentally inflationary. Create more currency, increase asset values, which benefits the asset owners, and systematically squeeze the middle and lower classes. This constant inflationary incentive structure is what China is banking on to lead to our internal decline.
Can you elaborate on that mechanism? Why is the U.S. economy structurally incentivized toward inflation?
Well, the structural incentives are enormous. First, just servicing the national debt requires constant devaluation of the dollar. If the dollar is worth less, the debt that was accrued yesterday becomes easier to pay off today.
Okay.
Second, maintaining high asset bubbles in the stock market and housing is politically popular among wealthy donors and the asset-owning class. Inflation fuels those bubbles.
But it hurts the middle and lower classes.
It crushes them. They hold most of their wealth in wages and cash, which lose value through inflation. This structural design means the money a middle-class employee makes today will buy dramatically less milk, less car, and require them to take on far more debt for housing next year. They are squeezed by design.
And that anxiety feeds directly back into the distrust we started with.
It's a vicious cycle.
And that leads directly to the severity of the looming U.S. economic crisis. You've suggested we're running out of time to fix this internally.
My estimate, based on the pace of debt accumulation and these inflationary spirals, is that the U.S. has only about a 10 to 15-year window to fix its economy internally.
And what's the solution?
The only solution is what economists have called a beautiful deleveraging, a painful, self-imposed economic contraction where everybody takes a hit, asset bubbles deflate responsibly, and we reset the system for genuine, non-debt-fueled growth.
But politically, we're unwilling to make ourselves jump off that ledge.
We're not. So if we wait to be pushed off the cliff, if we don't start that painful process now, the meltdown will be unavoidable, and we will decline too much to fix ourselves. That looming internal chaos is the single greatest existential threat, far exceeding anything happening in the Caribbean.
This has been a truly comprehensive deep dive. It's brought us full circle from the specific frustrations of government secrecy to these massive existential geopolitical threats. We started with the immediate anger over government silence, Epstein, Kirk, and what we've learned is that the gap in information isn't always hiding monsters. Often, it's hiding painfully slow constitutional processes, or just simple, frustrating incompetence.
That's absolutely right. Hanlon's razor teaches us that essential intellectual discipline to look for incompetence first, because it's the most common culprit.
But the real monsters?
The real monsters are operating in plain sight, whether it's through calculated information warfare designed to distract us, or strategic geopolitical maneuvering like the Rice War being fought over critical choke points.
And as we close, we have to revisit the underlying current of anxiety that feeds all this distrust, the relentless structural economic strain we just detailed. You spoke strongly about how the U.S. economy is incentivized to squeeze the middle and lower classes through inflation.
That is the truth people often dismiss, which is precisely the knowledge they should actively seek out and internalize. The systems are structurally inflationary. They benefit those who own assets and hurt those who rely on cash or wages.
So understanding that is the first step.
It's essential, because too often we choose to focus our fear and anger on external scapegoats, conspiracy theories, foreign actors, instead of focusing on the actionable task of securing personal and community financial independence and productivity.
Which leads to our final provocative thought for you, the learner. We discussed how economic anxiety often transmutes into anger and, historically, is focused on finding scapegoats. Instead of allowing that fear to control us, the sources offered a strategic counter-response, specifically recommending Rabbi Lupin's book, Thou Shalt Prosper.
That book argues that financial success is not based on complex economics, but is rooted in strong community building, productivity, and servicing real community needs. It's an argument for systemic local competence.
So instead of focusing on global fear,
Exactly. Instead of allowing global fear and national anger to focus your energy on blaming others, the most strategic response to this moment of U.S. economic decline is to adopt successful community and financial strategies that foster real, measurable productivity and local growth.
what actionable knowledge, like the principles outlined in Thou Shalt Prosper or the discipline of applying Hanlon's razor, are you currently dismissing that could fundamentally change your financial and intellectual outlook in the next 15 years? The best defense against global chaos is local, personal competence.
Be legendary in your focus.
Until next time, my friends.